I never thought my fight for survival would begin after the doctors said I made it through. At 70 years old, lying in that hospital room with tubes, stitches, and a voice barely strong enough to whisper, I felt more vulnerable than I ever had in my life. But nothing, not even the fear of dying on an operating table, cut as deep as hearing that my niece and nephew had already taken care of my house. Those were the exact words. As if my home, the place I built piece by piece after losing my husband, was theirs to rearrange like furniture. Everyone kept treating me like I wouldn't understand what was happening, like I wasn't supposed to wake up. But behind all that weakness was the same old me, quiet, steady, and raised to stand back up no matter how hard life pushed. And as I listened to the lies they rehearsed and the paperwork they waved around, I realized something they didn't. They thought I had no one left. But they forgot about the girl who grew up next door with me, now a county clerk with access to every file they forged. This time, the quiet one wasn't losing. This time, I was planning. I remember the sound first, those soft, steady beeps from the monitor they hooked me up to. It was the kind of sound you stop noticing after a while, like the ticking of an old wall clock. But in those early mornings, when the sky outside my hospital window was still a pale gray and the halls were quiet as a church before service, that beeping felt like a reminder that I was still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. The surgery had taken more out of me than I expected. They told me it would be routine, something they did every week. 2 hours, maybe 3, the doctor said, tapping the chart like he was knocking on a table for good luck. But things went longer. 5 hours, they told me later. Complications. A word nobody wants to hear when they're already lying on a table under bright lights with strangers holding your life in their hands. When I woke up afterward, groggy and confused, Camille was the first person I saw. My niece stood there with her hair pulled back, so tight it made her eyebrows look permanently surprised. She smiled too quickly, the way someone does when they've been practicing in the mirror. "Aunt Marian," she said, brushing imaginary dust off the blanket near my shoulder. "Try not to talk just yet. Just rest. We'll handle everything."
We.
She meant herself and my nephew, Darius, who was leaning against the far wall with his arms crossed like he was guarding the entrance to something valuable. He didn't smile. He just gave a quick nod, one of those upward jerks of the chin men use when they're impatient but trying to pretend they're not. I thought at first that they were just worried. I'm 70 years old. You don't go into surgery at that age without the younger folks hovering a little, calling a little more, speaking a little slower, like you're a glass bowl they don't want to drop. I didn't mind it. I'd helped raise both of them in one way or another. Camille used to sit on my porch swing and tell me all about her school troubles back when she was shy and sweet and wore her hair in little puffballs. Darius used to rake my leaves for $2 and a glass of lemonade. I'd seen the good parts of them, the parts their own parents didn't always get. But something felt different this time. The first 2 days were a fog. I slept more than I was awake. Classic after-surgery haze. But on the third day, once I could think clearly again, I noticed things. Whenever the nurse walked in to check my blood pressure, Camille would step forward like an overeager assistant. She answered questions for me before I had the chance to open my mouth. "How's your pain level today, Ms. Marian?" "She's managing," Camille would say, even though I hadn't said a word. "Are you feeling well enough to try sitting up for lunch?" "She's still tired," Camille would answer quickly, touching my shoulder like she was guiding me back into silence. And the strange thing was, the nurse seemed to accept it. Like my niece had become my spokesperson overnight. Like she knew what I needed better than I did. I remember looking at Camille's hand resting lightly on my arm and thinking, when did she start touching me like I was her child? Darius, on the other hand, barely spoke. But he always brought something with him. Papers, envelopes, glossy pamphlets. He'd toss them onto the tray table and say, "Just some options. Nothing you need to worry about yet." I'd blink at them through blurry eyes, and slowly, the words would sharpen into focus. Heritage Pines Retirement Village. Your next chapter in comfort. Easy transition care units. Short-term to long-term living options. Long-term living options. Retirement village. Comfort. That word comfort always bothers me when it comes from a young person. They don't understand which part of a life you might be willing to give up for so-called comfort. They think comfort means softness, stillness, warm meals. They don't understand that sometimes comfort is just being allowed to sit in a home you built with your own two hands, where you know every creaking board like an old friend. The third or fourth time Darius brought one of those brochures, I tried to joke. You planning to move in yourself? Some of these look nicer than your apartment. His lips twitched, but it wasn't a smile. Just thinking about your safety, Auntie. I remember that moment clearly. The way his eyes flicked away from mine too fast, like he didn't want to hold my gaze long enough for me to see whatever was hiding behind it. One afternoon, when they thought I was sleeping, I heard them whispering in the corner. The monitor's beeping covered their voices at first, but I slowed my breathing and the sound settled enough for me to make out their words. Shouldn't take long, Camille murmured. Closing date stays the same, Darius whispered back. As long as she's still here by then. Just don't say anything yet. Closing date. Still here. Don't say anything yet. My heart thumped hard inside my chest, chasing the rhythms of the beeping monitor. For a moment, I thought the machine might betray me, spell out my fear in flashing numbers. But I kept my breathing slow, kept my eyes closed. I'd learned long ago, especially after losing my husband, that sometimes you hear things you weren't supposed to hear, and the wisest thing you can do is pretend you didn't. Let the truth come quietly. Let it show its full shape before you speak. The next morning, I woke early. Sunlight barely touched the foot of my bed, just a soft gold triangle on the linoleum floor. My mouth was dry. My body felt stiff. But my mind was sharper than it had been all week. Camille wasn't there yet. Darius hadn't arrived. For the first time since the surgery, I was alone. A nurse came in, a different one this time, a young woman with braids pulled into a neat bun. She checked my pulse with gentle fingers. You doing all right this morning? She asked. I hesitated. My throat felt tight, but something in her eyes, steady, warm, made me want to trust her more than anyone else I'd seen in the last few days. Yes, I said slowly, but I'd like to ask you something. Of course. Do you know if I've received any mail? She blinked. Mail. Yes, dear. Mail. Letters. Anything delivered here for me. She thought for a moment, tucking the thermometer into its holder. There was something yesterday, she said finally. I left it at the front desk since your family was with you, and I didn't want to interrupt. My chest tightened. Would you mind bringing it to me? Not at all. Let me go check. She left the room, the door closing softly behind her. I stared at that little golden triangle of morning light on the floor and let my thoughts run wild. The envelopes Darius pretended weren't important. The whispers about closing dates. The brochures. The way they'd answered for me over and over again, like I didn't exist. When the door opened again, the nurse carried a manila envelope. Thick. Heavy. Too heavy to be junk mail or a greeting card. She walked it over to me, smiling kindly. This came yesterday afternoon, she said. My heart slowed. The room suddenly felt too quiet. She placed it in my hands. Odd thing, she added lightly. It was already opened. I looked down and saw it immediately. The flap had been torn. Not neatly opened, but ripped crookedly. Not by someone trying to help me, but by someone trying to see what was inside. My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the torn edge. Oh, I whispered. Is that so? She nodded gently. Do you want me to get your family so they can go over it with you? No, I said quickly, more sharply than I intended. No, thank you. I'll take a look myself. And before I even opened it, before I could slide out the papers hidden inside, something inside my chest sank with a cold, quiet certainty. Whatever was inside that envelope was never meant to be seen by them. And now that I held it in my hands, I knew they had already seen it. My fingers tightened around the manila envelope. This was only the beginning. I held that torn envelope in my hands longer than I meant to. My thumb kept tracing the jagged edge, as if the truth hidden inside would somehow soften under my touch. But the paper stayed stiff and cold, like it had been waiting for me to find it long after someone else already had. The nurse left the room quietly, and for the first time since the surgery, I felt the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Not loud, not violent, just the gentle shift of something you can't ignore any longer. I opened the envelope slowly. The paper inside slid out like a rigid sheet of ice. At first, my eyes struggled to adjust, still tired from pain medication and too many half-dreams. But when the words sharpened into view, I stopped breathing. Residential purchase agreement. Under contract. My house. My little two-bedroom cottage with appealing white paint and the porch swing my husband built before he passed. The one place left in this world that felt like I belonged to it as much as it belonged to me. The place where every photograph, every memory, every whispered prayer lived. And there it was, printed coldly on paper, under contract. I blinked at the signature near the bottom. My name was written in smooth cursive, just like mine. But the loop of the M looked rushed, like someone tried too hard to mimic my hand. And the tail of the N curled upward instead of down. I've been writing my own name for 70 years. I know its bones. That signature wasn't mine, not even close. My heart began to beat harder, heavier. Not fast, not panicked, just heavy. The way it beats when you know someone has crossed a line they can't uncross. I folded the paper back into its envelope, exhaled slowly, and pressed the call button on my bedside remote. My finger was steady, even though my insides were trembling like a tuning fork. Camille walked in before the nurse could. She pushed the curtain aside gently, like she always did, with a practiced smile plastered on her face. "Aunt Marian," she said, dragging a chair over. "You're awake. Want some water?" "Sit," I said softly. That surprised her. She froze for a second before lowering herself into the chair. Her perfume, lavender, and something sharper underneath, spread through the air. I held up the envelope. "Did you open this?" Her smile tightened. Just a hair. But I saw it. "Oh, that," she said lightly. "It came yesterday. The hospital staff didn't want to bother you. I thought I'd help by making sure it wasn't anything urgent." It was addressed to me. Yes, well, sometimes you just need someone to help you sort through things. Especially right now. My voice stayed steady. "This isn't junk mail, Camille." Before she could reply, I slid the notice of sale out and placed it gently between us, like something fragile. Her eyes flicked over it. Not in surprise. Not even in confusion. More like she was checking if I'd seen every detail. "Why is my house under contract?" She didn't answer right away. She reached forward, patting my hand lightly with the kind of touch people give when they're trying to calm a dog during a storm. "Auntie, you're confused. You've been through a lot. The surgery was harder on you than anyone expected." That word, confused, hit me like someone pressing a thumb against a bruise. Confused. My husband used to say people use that word when they don't want you questioning their story. "Camille," I said quietly, "I know what my own signature looks like." She leaned back, her lips curving into something too smooth to be genuine. "Dad always said you had a stubborn streak. Maybe you're remembering things differently. It happens at your age." There it was. Age. Another word used like a weapon. I felt an emotional spike rise in my chest. Not anger exactly, but an ache so sharp it made my eyes sting. I had raised this girl in pieces, step by step, because her own mother was always too busy working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. I'd taken her in during school vacations, bought her dresses, taught her how to make cornbread from scratch, and now she sat there looking at me like I was a burden she needed to manage. But I stayed calm. That was all I had left in that moment, my calm. "Show me the other papers," I said. Her voice snapped back quickly, too quickly. There are no other papers. You're lying. She blinked. That made her shift slightly, just enough to betray her surprise. Aunt Marion, don't do this.
You need rest.
Let us manage things. There was that phrase again, let us manage things. Like my life was a project they could reorganize with color-coded tabs and a clipboard. I reached for the notice again, but she snatched it up with a speed that didn't match her gentle act. She folded it neatly, slipped it back into the envelope, and tucked it into her purse. You shouldn't stress yourself with paperwork. That was the last straw. I felt a hollow space widen inside my chest, the kind of quiet hurt that doesn't show on your face but changes something deep in your bones. What would you have done in my place? That question whispered through my mind, not out loud, just a small voice inside me, wondering how anyone else would handle discovering that the family you loved was quietly rearranging your life behind your back. The nurse came in then, breaking the tension. Her eyes flicked between us, sensing something heavy in the air. Ms. Marion, the doctor will see you shortly. He's doing his rounds. Camille stood. I'll step out and get some coffee. Maybe you'll feel better after resting. She leaned in, kissed my forehead too quickly, and hurried out before I could say another word. The nurse stayed behind, checking my vitals. Are you all right? She asked softly. I forced a small smile. I will be. Just as she finished adjusting the blanket, the doctor walked in, a tall man with a deep voice and tired eyes. He glanced at my chart, then smiled. Good news, he said. Your recovery is on track. We should be able to move forward with discharge soon. I nodded slowly. When? Your niece already signed the early discharge paperwork. You should be ready to leave by tomorrow morning. My breath caught in my throat. The room felt too warm suddenly. I'm sorry, I said carefully. My niece signed what? Your discharge papers, he repeated. It's standard if the family is handling arrangements. She didn't tell you? I stared at him. Handling arrangements. I thought of the brochures, the whispered conversations, the forged signature, the torn envelope, the urgency, the closing date. And suddenly the truth clicked into place like a lock turning. They weren't waiting for me to recover. They were waiting for me to be gone. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Not without knowing the full shape of the storm forming around me. But inside my chest, a quiet resolve settled into place like a stone dropping into still water. Something was coming. Something bigger than forged papers and fake smiles. And if they thought I was too weak to fight it, they were about to be proven wrong. The hospital has its own kind of rhythm. Footsteps in the hall at certain hours, the shift change murmurs, the soft roll of carts moving like waves up and down the corridor. By the time afternoon light settled across my blanket, I had memorized all of it. Every sound, every shadow, every interruption. But nothing prepared me for the soft, hesitant knock at my door late that evening. It wasn't the sharp knock of a nurse with medicine or the rushed tap of the doctor doing his rounds. This one was timid, almost apologetic. I looked up just as the door creaked open and a custodian slipped inside. A young man, maybe in his 20s, with tired brown eyes and a mop handle still in his hand. His name tag read James in fading letters, like it had been wiped one too many times. Ma'am, he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder before stepping fully inside. May I talk to you for a minute? My heart tightened, but I nodded. Something in his voice, gentle, cautious, told me this wasn't a casual chat. He shut the door halfway. Not fully closed, but enough to give us a small pocket of privacy. I've been cleaning this floor for months, he began, voice barely above a whisper. I don't get in people's business. I swear I don't. He swallowed. But I heard some things today. Things I don't think you were meant to hear. I felt the room still itself. The monitor hummed behind me, steady and patient. What kind of things? I asked softly. He looked down, twisting the edge of a folded sheet of paper between his fingers. Your family, he murmured. Your niece and the man with her. They were talking near the supply closet. They didn't know I was in there. I didn't mean to overhear, ma'am." He held out the paper. "I found this after they walked away. It seemed wrong. And I just felt like you deserved to know." My fingers trembled as I reached for it. The paper was warm from his hands, but the moment I unfolded it, a chill crawled across my skin. It was an official document. The county seal at the top. A notary stamp near the bottom. 2 signatures. And mine, except it wasn't mine. The title read, "Temporary Power of Attorney. Emergency Use." My throat tightened. It listed Darius, my own nephew, as the person authorized to sign legal and financial papers on my behalf. It was dated the morning of my surgery. The exact time matched when I had been sedated and wheeled away onto that cold operating table. I stared at the signature marked Marion Rhodes. The loops were neat. The penmanship was confident. But it wasn't mine. Someone else had written the letters of my name like a costume, close enough to look believable if you didn't know me, wrong enough to make my blood turn cold. I took in a slow breath, steadying myself. "Where did you find this?" I whispered. James shifted uncomfortably. "They dropped it, ma'am, on the floor. They were arguing about whether they should tell you anything now or wait." A faint trembling started in my chest. Not fear. Not yet. More like the beginning of a truth unraveling itself. "What exactly did you hear them say?" I asked. His eyes softened with sadness, like he was delivering news he wished he didn't have to. "They said, 'Today was perfect timing.' And the man, your nephew, laughed a little. He said something like, 'She won't be needing the place much longer anyway.'" My breath froze midair. He hesitated again before adding, "And your niece said they had to move fast before anyone on staff started asking questions." A slow, heavy ache settled behind my ribs. I felt it crawl upward into my throat. Not physical pain, emotional. Deep, old, bone-heavy hurt. The kind that makes a person think back to childhood birthdays, Christmas dinners, and all the times I'd loved these two like my own. James pinched the bridge of his nose nervously. I wasn't sure what to do. But when I saw that paper on the ground, I thought, this ain't right. So I held on to it. He leaned closer. "And ma'am, look at the notary stamp. You might recognize the name." I lowered my eyes. "Notary, Kelsey L. Hargrove." I whispered the name aloud. Kelsey. A flash of memory hit me. Camille at 15, crying on my couch about a girl named Kelsey spreading rumors. Then, at 19, going to community college together. Then later, hearing Camille say, "She's doing notary work now." I felt something hot behind my eyes, an emotional spike sharp enough to make me blink hard. They didn't just forge my signature. They planned it, chose someone who wouldn't question them, used my sedation as their opportunity. The betrayal settled deeper, like a slow bruise. I folded the paper carefully, pressing each crease like I was trying not to break it further. James watched me, worry tightening his expression. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded slightly. "Thank you, James. Truly." My voice came out soft, steady, more steady than I felt. "You didn't have to do this." His shoulders softened. "Ma'am, everyone deserves at least one person in their corner, even if that person's a stranger with a mop." A small, aching smile tugged at my lips. "You're not a stranger anymore." He stepped back, lowering his voice even further. "There's more." His eyes darted to the hallway. When I left my shift, I heard them again. This time downstairs, near the elevator. They were talking fast, arguing. I held still, barely breathing. "And your niece said something like, 'She won't be discharged without us signing off. Just keep her calm until Monday.'" Monday. 3 days away. 3 days in which they had total control over my body, my home, my accounts, my decisions. James took a tiny step closer, urgency trembling in his voice. "Ma'am, they don't think you're going home." Those words dropped into the room like a stone breaking water. The ripples of it hit every corner of my mind. My fingers tightened around the paper. My breath came slower, deeper, like I was pulling calm from some place I didn't know existed anymore. I'd felt fragile earlier, but now I felt awake. Awake in a way I hadn't been since before the surgery, before the whispers, before all of this began. I leaned back slowly against my pillows. "James," I said quietly, "thank you for trusting me with this." His eyes glistened with worry. "You need someone. Someone who actually's on your side." "I have someone," I murmured. "Family?" he asked. I shook my head gently. "No." "Someone better." His eyebrows lifted. "Who?" "A friend I've known for 60 years," I said, a small warmth blooming behind my sternum. "Someone who works where all these papers go." He blinked. "Where's that?" "The county clerk's office." I placed the folded document under my blanket, close to my stomach. "And tomorrow morning," I whispered, "she'll be the first person I call." James nodded, relief softening his expression. He backed toward the door, opening it just an inch, then paused. "Be careful, ma'am," he whispered. Then he slipped out as quietly as he came. And I lay there in the dim hospital light, staring at the ceiling tiles like they held answers. My chest rose and fell in slow, even breaths. My hands felt steady against the sheets. I wasn't confused. I wasn't helpless. And I wasn't alone. But one truth burned louder than all the others. My niece and nephew, the children I once held, had already written me out of the life I wasn't done living. And they were expecting me not to survive long enough to see what they'd done. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I didn't sleep much after James left. The hospital room felt different now, like the shadows in the corners knew things I had only just begun to understand. Every soft footstep in the hallway made my heart tighten just a little, not from fear exactly, but from anticipation, like something inside me had opened its eyes for the first time in a long time. The folded power of attorney paper rested under my blanket, warm against my hip. I kept tapping it gently with my fingers just to remind myself it was real, that I hadn't imagined the forged signature, the county seal, the notary stamp that shouldn't have been there. At around 10 that night, after visiting hours had ended and the halls grew quiet, I reached for my phone. My hands were weak, and the stitches in my side tugged with every movement, but I managed. There was only one person I could call, Lila Carter. We'd been friends since we were 7 years old, running barefoot through the red clay fields behind my grandmother's house. She had always been the bolder one, sharp-tongued, sharp-minded, and the type of girl who'd go home with skinned knees but a smile big as sunrise. Life had shaped her into a woman with the same spirit, just wrapped in a well-pressed blazer and carrying a county ID badge. When she answered the phone, her voice was a warm thread pulling me back from the edge. "Marion? You all right? Why are you calling this late?" I lowered my voice. "Lila, I need you. And I need you to come tonight if you can." Something shifted in her tone instantly, the way it always did when she sensed trouble. "Tell me where." "Room 214, Community Hospital. Don't come through the main entrance. Use the side door near the cafeteria." She didn't ask a single question. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. "Sit tight." The minutes crawled by like old paint peeling down a wall. I watched the light outside dim from pale yellow to soft gray until it finally flattened into night. A nurse passed once, then again an hour later, each time checking the charts quietly, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the doorway. Then, sometime close to midnight, the door opened, and in walked Lila, hair pulled back, glasses perched on her nose, wearing a long brown coat that made her look less like a county clerk and more like some undercover detective. She acted like she was visiting a sick friend, smiling warmly, waving at the night nurse as if she belonged there. When the door closed, her whole expression dropped into seriousness. "All right," she whispered, pulling up a chair. "What's going on?" I handed her the folded document. She read the first half with her brow furrowing. By the time she hit the notary section, her mouth tightened into a thin line. "This is illegal," she murmured. "And sloppy." They didn't even bother to mask the timestamp. They signed it while I was sedated. She looked up sharply, pain flickering across her eyes. "Omari, I'm so sorry." I swallowed slowly. "Can you check the county files?" She didn't hesitate. She opened her coat and pulled out a tablet, powering it on quickly. "We need privacy," she whispered. Without another word, she pushed my wheelchair toward the door. My stitches tugged, but I held the armrests and let her guide me. The hallway lights cast long stripes of pale gold across the floors. The hospital felt like a different world at night, quiet, reverent, holding its breath. Lila didn't take me toward the nurse's station. Instead, she turned down a side hallway I hadn't noticed before, past the supply closet, and toward a door with a private sign taped crookedly near the frame. She knocked lightly. The door opened a crack, and an older night shift nurse peeked out. Her eyes brightened. "Lila, what are you doing here at this hour?" "Just checking on my aunt," Lila said smoothly. "Can we use the family consult room for a minute?" The nurse nodded. "Of course. Room 3 is empty." Inside the small room, the walls were painted a soft beige. A single lamp glowed beside a low table cluttered with tissues and half-empty coffee cups. There were 2 chairs and a recliner. It was meant for grieving families, but tonight it was my war room. Lila parked my wheelchair beside the recliner and sat. She opened the tablet, fingers moving quickly, entering a passcode only county employees could memorize. "All right," she murmured. "Let's see what these 2 have been doing." The screen glowed blue, then white, then lines of text appeared. Document lists, timestamps, filings, digital logs. Her fingers darted, scrolling, clicking, narrowing search fields. I watched the reflection of the screen flicker in her glasses, painting her face in shifting shades of blue. My chest tightened with every second. After a moment, she stopped. "There," she said quietly. "Your property deed was accessed 3 times in the last 2 weeks." "By who?" She tapped again. The names popped up. Darius Rhodes. Camille Rhodes. My breath caught. "They accessed the power of attorney forms, transferred your mailing address to Camille's apartment, and Omari." She pressed her lips together. "What?" I whispered. She turned the screen slightly, letting me see it. "Sale closing, scheduled for Friday at 9 a.m. 2 days from now." I stared at it, the words swimming slightly. "Dear Lord," I whispered. A soft, reflective moment washed over me, something like grief, but deeper. Not grief for the house. No, I could live in a hut if I had to. It was grief for the betrayal. The quiet, sharp, intentional betrayal of people I had held, fed, sheltered, loved. Lila reached over and squeezed my hand gently. "They planned everything," she said. "Every step." I nodded without speaking. She looked back at the screen. "They filed the listing without a live signature. They used the emergency POA. They forged anything they couldn't access. And they did it right under the county's nose." A subtle suspense beat tight in the air. "They've done this kind of thing before, haven't they?" I asked. Lila exhaled slowly. "I can't legally answer that." A pause. "But what I can say is, this wasn't their first attempt at using loopholes." That hit me harder than I expected. I picture my niece at 10 years old, proud of the little clay bowl she made in art class. I pictured Darius at 14, legs dangling off my porch step, telling me he wanted to be a mechanic someday. And now here they were, selling my life out from under me before the stitches in my body had even healed. Lila turned the tablet so she could type more freely. "I'm going to print every one of these filings," she murmured. "You need hard copies. Judges don't always trust screens." She tapped the screen again. "And I'm going to invalidate anything that was filed with a forged POA. But Mari," she paused, the screen's glow flickering across her face. "There's something you need to understand. I lifted my gaze. What? She leaned closer, her voice dropping low. These filings don't fully stop until someone physically walks into the office, claims the fraud, and signs an affidavit. Online reversals only pause things. They don't end them. A small flutter of worry moved under my ribs. I'm still recovering. I know. And they're planning to discharge me early tomorrow. I know. And Camille will try to take me straight to some facility. I know. Her eyes softened with warmth, then hardened with resolve. That's why you'll need to show up before they can move you anywhere. I looked down at my hands resting weakly in my lap. The bruises from the IVs. The surgical tape on my wrist. The delicate skin still tender from the incision. I don't know if I can walk, I whispered. She squeezed my hand again. You won't have to. I'll take you. A knot lodged in my throat. You do that for me? I whispered. Her eyes glistened. I've been waiting 40 years to repay you for the time you sold your wedding ring to help my mama keep our lights on. Her voice cracked. You think I'm letting this happen to you? I swallowed hard, tears stinging behind my eyes. We'll go early, she continued. Before visiting hours, before your niece shows up. I'll get you discharged properly. We'll use the staff entrance. She paused, the screen lighting her face with one last flicker of urgency. But Mari, she murmured, looking up. I met her gaze. If you want this stopped, you'll need to show up in person. My heart thudded once, deep, heavy, loud. Because for the first time I understood. This was going to be a quiet battle. No yelling. No confrontation. No accusations in hospital rooms. Just truth. Just paperwork. Just me showing up where they never expected me to. And I was ready. By the time dawn touched the edge of the hospital curtains, my world had shifted completely. Lila was asleep in the recliner beside me, arms folded across her chest, her glasses tilted slightly on her nose. I watched her breathing, slow, steady, familiar, and for a moment, a soft warmth came over me. 60 years of friendship had brought her to this exact chair, at this exact hour, risking her job because she believed in me. It reminded me of being 16 again, sitting under that pecan tree behind my grandmother's house, whispering secrets into the summer air. Lila always said, Don't let life scare you, Mari. You stand up even when folks expect you to fall. I didn't know at the time how much those words would mean today. The first shift nurse arrived at 6. Lila jolted awake, smoothing her coat and giving me that sharp look, half alertness, half strategy. You ready? She whispered. As ready as a 70-year-old woman held together by stitches can be. She snorted, but there was pride in her smile. Within an hour, we had everything in motion. Lila knew the right people, the right rooms, the right signatures that allowed me to be properly discharged, quietly, cleanly, without giving Camille and Darius so much as a whisper of suspicion. We're going out the staff elevator, Lila said, her voice low. They checked the family entrance. I nodded. My heart was steady in my chest. Not fast. Not frightened. Just steady, like a drumbeat guiding me forward. The hallways felt colder that morning, the fluorescent lights harsher. As Lila wheeled me toward the service corridor, every sound, the squeak of the wheelchair, the distant chatter of nurses, the shuffle of patients, felt like part of a quiet mission. We exited through a side door where the wind met my face sharp and real. I breathed in the crisp morning air, letting it wash over me, clearing out the hospital smell I'd grown used to. Lila's car, a dusty blue sedan she'd had for years, sat waiting like an old horse ready for one more journey. She helped me into the passenger seat gently, making sure the seatbelt didn't press too hard on my stitches. You good? She asked. I'm good, I said. Let's go. Instead of taking me home, my home that no longer felt mine, Lila drove straight to a small motel on the edge of town. A humble place with faded green doors and hanging flower baskets that someone still watered faithfully every morning. I booked this in my name, she said. No paper trail to you. The manager was half asleep behind the counter, but snapped to attention when Lila spoke to him with her county official tone, firm enough to command respect, soft enough to avoid suspicion. The room was simple: 2 beds, a small table, a lamp with a yellow shade that cast a warm glow. After days of hospitals, it felt almost like stepping into an old movie. The blankets were stiff, but clean. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed, exhaling slowly. "I can't believe this is happening," I whispered. Lila pulled up a chair, her eyes watching me with a mixture of sympathy and something harder, something protective. "I didn't want to tell you everything yesterday," she said quietly. "You needed rest first." My heart thudded once. "What else did you find?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of printed papers, thick and heavy. She placed them on the bed between us. "This is why they rushed the sale." The room seemed to shrink. I reached for the top page. It wasn't county paperwork. It was a private ledger. Credit advances, bank statements, payment demands. There were late notices, collection calls, underlined names of lenders I'd never heard of, and a final sheet with bold, red letters. "Delinquent. Final warning. They owe money," I murmured. Lila nodded. "A lot. More than they could ever repay. And not to the kind of people who send polite reminders." My hands trembled. "How long has this been going on?" "Years, from what I can tell. But it got worse recently. Looks like someone cut them off and they panicked. And they thought—" I swallowed hard. "They thought I wouldn't make it through the surgery." Lila didn't look away. Didn't soften it. Didn't flinch. "Yes," she whispered. "They banked on it." A slow, deep ache spread through my chest, not the ache for my stitches, but something older, deeper, more personal. The kind of heartbreak that settles into your bones and asks you quietly, "How could they?" I thought of Camille's hand on my forehead, patting me like a child. I thought of Darius hovering in corners, eyes cold. I thought of the whispers at night, the brochures, the forged signature, the notary stamp made by a friend. They didn't just betray me. They calculated me. The emotional spike hit me all at once. Tears welled up, but not the hot, shaking kind. These were quiet tears. Heavy tears. Tears that carried years of memories, birthdays, holidays, the little drawings Camille made when she was 5, and asked if she could call me Annie Mama because I made her feel safe. Lila reached out and squeezed my hand. "You don't cry because you're weak," she said softly. "You cry because you loved them." I nodded, wiping my cheek gently. "So my house was their lifeboat," she said. "They promised someone they'd have the money by Friday." I stared at the papers in my hands. "And Friday is tomorrow." A subtle suspense beat tight in the air around us. I took a long breath, letting the truth settle into place. It didn't feel chaotic anymore. It felt clear, sharp, solid. "So, they didn't just steal my home," I murmured. "They gambled with my life." "Yes," Lila whispered. "They did." A reflective calm washed through me. It surprised me how still I felt, steady-rooted. Betrayal doesn't always make a loud noise. Sometimes it's quiet, like water rising slowly under a locked door. I placed the papers gently beside me. "What do we do now?" I asked. Lila lifted another envelope, the one she'd been holding since she walked in. "We go where they never expected you to show up." She handed it to me. It was an official notice. County seal. Stamped. Time and date. I read it slowly. Closing appointment. Friday, 9 a.m. Location: Crawford Title and Deed Office. My breath caught. That was tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. If they believed I was still in the hospital, or worse, too weak to move, they would walk in bold as daylight, ready to finalize the theft. "They think you're out of the picture," Lila said. "They think you're sedated. They think you won't wake up. They think you won't rise from that bed." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth settle like dust. And when I opened them again, something in me had shifted, something quiet but powerful. Then I whispered, tomorrow morning I'll rise. Lila smiled gently. And you'll walk into that closing and take back what's yours. I looked at the notice again, the crisp paper, the bold letters, the silent countdown. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. Everything would come to light, and I would be there. Morning came softly, like it didn't want to disturb me. I sat on the edge of that motel bed for a long minute, feeling the weight of my body settle, feeling the steady pull of my stitches, feeling the strange mixture of nerves and strength stirring in my chest. Lila stood near the window, sipping a cup of motel coffee and watching the parking lot as if she were guarding the door. You ready, Mari? She asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for my cane, the old chestnut wood one my husband carved years before he passed. The grain felt smooth under my fingers, familiar. I pressed my palm against the handle and exhaled slowly. As ready as I'll ever be. She nodded, understanding more in 3 words than anyone else could in a full speech. We drove in near silence. The sun was still low, just beginning to stretch across the rooftops. I watched the world through the passenger window, the bakery opening its doors, a man sweeping his front steps, a woman walking her dog. Life happening. Life I almost lost while other people planned to bury me under their greed. The building where the closing was scheduled sat on the corner of Main and Ellis. Crawford Title and Deed Office. White brick, tall glass doors, a small parking lot filled with early morning cars. Lila pulled into a spot near the entrance, shifted into park, and placed her hand over mine. Remember, she said firmly, you don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to explain yourself. The truth will do the talking. My mother always said dignity is the sharpest weapon a woman can carry. And she was right, Lila said. Now go in there and carry it. She helped me out of the car, her arms steady around mine, guiding me slowly but confidently toward those glass doors. Each step felt like reclaiming something, my strength, my voice, my home, my life. Inside, the room was bright and cold. Tile floors, neutral-colored chairs, a long wooden table set up for the closing, covered with neat stacks of paper and 2 small bottles of water. Camille and Darius were already seated. They looked relaxed at first, maybe even relieved, until they looked up and saw me. Their faces drained of color in the same instant, as if someone pulled the life right out of them. Camille's mouth dropped open. Darius froze, mid-sip of coffee, his hand trembling slightly. Aunt Marion? Camille breathed, her voice cracking. You're supposed to be in the hospital. I leaned gently on my cane, breathing slow, steady breaths. I said softly. But I decided I wasn't done living yet. Darius stood up abruptly. You shouldn't be walking. You're sick. We were handling things for you. Handling things, I repeated, letting the words settle between us like dust. Yes. I saw how well you were handling them. The real estate agent, who had been organizing paperwork, looked from me to them with growing confusion. I'm sorry, she said cautiously, but you're the homeowner? Yes, I said, and the only person authorized to sell this property. Camille swallowed hard, her face flushing red. Auntie, please, Without a word, I opened my bag and placed every forged document on the table. The room fell silent except for the soft rustle of paper. Lila stepped forward and laid one more sheet on top, the official notice from her office invalidating the fraudulent filings. The agent's eyebrows shot up. She picked up the paper slowly, scanning each one. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something colder. These signatures, she murmured. These aren't legal. And this power of attorney, this is clearly forged. Camille's voice cracked. She's confused. She's not well. She doesn't know what she's saying. I lifted my eyes to hers, calm And still, I know my own name, I said. I know my own signature. And I know exactly what you tried to do. Darius stepped forward, palms out. Aunt Marion, we can explain. We were trying to help. I raised a hand, quieting him without a single word. You plan to sell my home, I said softly. My home. The one your uncle painted by hand. The one where you learned to walk, Camille. The one where Darius spent summers on my porch swing. You forged my name. You moved my mail. You opened accounts. You stole my decisions. They stared at the floor, neither offering a single denial. The agent took a careful breath. This deal cannot proceed, she said firmly. In fact, this must be reported. She reached for her phone. No, Camille cried out. Please, we can fix this. Please don't call. But the agent had already dialed. The buyers, a middle-aged couple seated at the far end of the table, stood up and stepped back with looks of betrayal. We're not part of this, the husband said sharply. We didn't know about any of this. They walked out without signing a single page. Camille sank into her chair, shaking. Darius paced near the wall, his hands on his head. Aunt Marion, he whispered, please don't do this. I looked at him for a long moment. The boy I once knew, the man he became, and the stranger who almost erased me, all living inside the same face. You did this, I said gently. Not me. The police arrived faster than I expected, 2 officers, calm and polite. They took statements. They collected the forged documents. Camille cried. Darius tried to bargain. Neither of them looked at me again. And through all of it, I stayed silent. Not cruel, not triumphant, just steady. My mother always said quiet strength lasts longer than loud anger. When the officers finally escorted them out, Camille looked back at me, not with hatred, not even with anger, but with the kind of brokenness that comes from realizing you crossed a line you can't step back over. I didn't speak. Some truths don't need words. Underscore 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 underscore. Lila drove me home afterward. The neighborhood looked the same, but somehow the air felt lighter. When I stepped out of the car, leaning on my cane, the sunlight spilled across my porch steps in neat golden lines. Warm, gentle, alive. My house stood there just as it always had, quiet, patient, ready for me. I walked up to the porch, slowly. Every step felt like sewing back a part of my life. When I reached the top, I paused, letting the morning breeze brush across my face. Inside, the living room still smelled faintly of lavender and old books. My chair was where I left it. The framed photo of my husband was still angled just the way he liked it. Everything was still mine. I sank into my chair with a long, slow breath. I had lived to walk back into my life, something they never expected. And that was justice enough. Quiet. Steady. Certain. Mine.